So welcome back everyone to this sixth and final part of the series on apartment developments and health and well-being. I'm Dr. Tamara Al-Obaidi. I have a PhD in healthy places and housing where I examined what makes apartment buildings healthy, and my research was about asking residents themselves about what influences their health in relation to apartment buildings from their own perspective and using their own lived experiences. Again, to recap, what is this series about? It's a series of short educational videos on making future apartment developments healthy for people. Those involved in, and it concerns those involved in decision making. If you are, involved in decision making around the development of future apartment buildings, these series are for you. And the videos provide a framework of components which together need to be considered by those involved in future developments if we want to, create healthier apartment developments. The examples I'm using sit within the context of the city of Sydney, but equally important as lessons learned for international and, national and international audiences. And in this slide, I list the 5 fundamentals for creating healthy apartment buildings and developments. You should consider these 5 components together as these are interlinked, as illustrated in the layout of the framework. Importantly, this framework isn't just, a checklist. It changes how whether you are a manager, a practitioner, a strategist, a researcher, a developer, a contractor, think about how to go about planning, designing, and doing policies concerning residential developments. You could see here, I'm not providing a list of factors that you can typically tick in your project or policy. I'm moving things up a level to make you shift the way that you think about creating healthier housing and places for people. So let's now explain and go through the 5th and final fundamental component of the framework that I'm talking about here, which is consider dynamic interactions. So let's go through this. So those making decisions about future apartment buildings or developments need to consider the dynamic interactions that are taking place between different aspects or factors. Why is this the case? Well, because it is these very interactions that influence health and well-being. So health and well-being are a function, if you want to think about it, health and well-being are a function of these dynamic interactions and interdependencies between factors. So factors don't just directly lead to health and well-being outcomes. Rather, these dynamic relationships can influence health directly, indirectly, unpredictably, and also over time. So, for example, yes, you will need to consider sound and how it may influence future residents in their apartment, and you will hopefully assess, noise using different methods and compare them with the noise background of the area, how the sound, travels between apartments, and so on. But there are other elements that you will need to think about as well that could influence health and well-being beyond, these 2 factors and beyond sound itself, that may influence health and well-being, including things like construction, where the apartment is located, and so on, because these may interact together and ultimately affect health and well-being in the short term and the long term, directly, indirectly, and unpredictably over time. So let's take an example of a resident's case from Sydney who participated in my research on healthy apartment living to demonstrate and explain the significance of interactions between several factors and aspects together. So this participant Lou, and it's not her real name, gave several examples of such dynamic interactions between several factors and areas of influence. Areas or aspects that influence health and well-being. So let's take one example. So noise from multiple sources was one of the apartment building's stressors that Lou talked about during the interview, making apartment building stressors a really prominent aspect or area that influence her health and well-being. So she said, and I quote, "So for me, noise is quite a big factor. Being so close to the train station, it is quiet, loud, that we have the windows open during the day. And then at night, there is also night works that happen on the other side of the building. So there is noise at like 2 a.m. every night. We have to like get up and close the windows just to stop the noise factor. And then on top of that, our apartment backs onto the elevator shaft. And so that has been a really noisy thing. And if you are a light sleeper, I can be okay. It takes me a while to get to sleep. But my partner's quiet, a light sleeper. So it does make quiet a difference. There is some sort of night works that happens like on the Redfern Street side of things. And that starts while there is obviously no traffic and things like that. And then during the day, you are doing quite a lot of construction at the train station as well. So it's sort of like a constant. So let's examine this quote further to explain to you the dynamics of what is going on here. So if we dissect the example that Resident Lou gave here, when it comes to noise itself, multiple factors were mentioned, including external noise from construction activities, noise from trains, and internal noise from the apartment backing onto the elevator shaft that she talked about. Also, the participant here mentioned of the time of noise during the day and night is again another influencing factor of her health and well-being, which suggests a constant background noise that is going on. However, noise from multiple sources does not sit, in a vacuum. The resident here mentioned a link between noise from trains and the location of their apartment building being so close to Redfern train station, which shows a relationship between apartment building stressors and the physical location of apartment buildings as two really main aspects or main areas that can influence health and well-being. In addition to noise, Lou also, the same participant that I just quoted, then also introduced mold as another factor that spoke of apartment building stressors. So she said, and I quote, "The mold is a big factor. Like we told our real estate agent that we moved in and there was a moldy ceiling, and they were like, yeah, that happens. Like the ventilation within the building isn't good." That's like, wow, that's not really an acceptable answer to that solution. But we've been cleaning it and stuff. But in this humidity with like constant rain for the last few months, it's been quite a mission to keep it under control. So let's again dissect this example by Resident Lou. So you could see how the participants drew connections from several but interconnected really domains or areas that can influence health and well-being, including apartment building stressors, extreme weather events, the quality in building and the itself, and the powers of renters. So if we take what the participant said at face value, it would seem that mold was the only cause of concern. If you go back and read the quote, you would think, really, rightfully, that mold was the only cause of concern in here. However, if you go back and read, Lou reflected on mold within the context of the recent weather conditions that took place in New South Wales, where Sydney is located, in 2022 before the interview. And this makes extreme weather events as another area that can influence health and well-being. The participant also talked about the quality of the building ventilation as an influencing factor in her quote, given the history of mold in her apartment. So ultimately, the mold's management was also linked with the apartment's real estate agent response, which places the management of apartment issue as another influencing but interconnected factor. So you could see all these things are connected together, even though Lou the participant was talking about mold, but you could see the connections with the weather conditions, management of apartment issues, the real estate agent, the quality of building ventilation, and all these bring different domains together. So we can't just think about mold by itself. We have to also think about extreme weather events. We have to think about quality in the building and the infrastructure that we're building. And we have to also think about the powers of renters, being that Lou is a renter herself. During the interview, participant Lou reflected further on the quality of ventilation in their apartments, this time within the context of heat and the apartment's location from the sun. So she said, and I quote, "It's not well ventilated. There is, I think air conditioning is a big one as well. There are hot days and we faced west. So the afternoon can be warmed, to say the least. And so you do want to be able to make yourself comfortable. And especially like working from home as well, like I need that to feel like I can be productive and things like that as well." So let's talk about the factors in this quote by participant Lou and what she was alluding to. So unlike the previous example on mold, the quality of ventilation was brought here to focus by Lou through its relationship with heat waves as another factor that reflects extreme weather events, in addition to the other weather conditions the participant mentioned. But the resident also referred to the apartment location facing direction to the sun. Being in an apartment that faces the west demonstrate a link between heat and the way apartments are placed from the sun direction, or the sun's direction, sorry. In this case, with working from home, having air conditioning became crucial to Lou's ability to feel comfortable, indicating that residents' individual needs now is another linked and interdependent influencer of health and well-being, along with the apartment day-to-day use by the resident. Okay. Participant Lou then further showed the relationships and far reach of these interconnections, extend between factors, extending beyond the apartment building level. In this next example on the slide, we see interactions taking place between factors, extending outside the apartment building and into the surrounding area and neighborhood. So resident Lou said, and I quote, "I do a lot of walking and things like that. So like when I'm looking at apartments, I would need somewhere where I know that I could go for a walk or run in the morning. So, there is parks nearby, there is green space, there is just somewhere where I don't feel like I'm in such a small little apartment, because at the moment it's a 1-bedroom apartment. It can feel quite small, like we are actually isolating for COVID at the moment, because I did my PhD during COVID and I did the interviews during COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence why this resident mentioned COVID. So in this excerpt, in the last excerpt, we could see how maintaining walking habits was important for this participant, which likely influenced her choice of the apartment building, since it may be linked with having outdoor green spaces nearby the apartment building. Having outdoor green spaces close by is particularly influential, as it also appears to compensate for the apartment size, being 1 bedroom, and the lack of shared facilities in the building. The extent of space per apartment as a factor was also something that came to light during COVID-19, during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly when the participant was isolating from COVID at home. So these links and interdependencies of factors expressed by the participants, you could see they illustrate the importance of considering the area of influence of the domains of residents' individual needs and the interconnections and relationship that this area has with other aspects, including the surrounding area and neighborhood, the apartment day-to-day use by participants, and also emergent health conditions. And towards the end of my interview with the same participant, Lou here, she went beyond the apartment building level and neighborhood as two areas or two domains that influence health and well-being. So she said, and I quote, "It would be so great to, have more of a community sense in the building, or, just have better places to escape your apartment, not necessarily like leave. But the facilities and things like that, I think there is a lot to be done. And I think there is definitely improvements. And I do think that, with the population growth in the cities and housing affordability, apartments are going to be more and more everyone's life. So I think, better designed, more sustainable apartment blocks are going to be in demand. And if we can do it the right way, then there will be more people who will be more open to apartment living than they are right now. So in this last example that I'm giving here by the same resident from Sydney, we could see how participant Lou further noted the importance of having a sense of community within the building as an influencing factor that speaks of place belonging. She also went beyond obvious factors like link with health and well-being. For example, Lou linked the factor apartment design with sustainable apartment buildings. Given population growth and housing and affordability in Sydney in general, she considered this factor influential, especially if apartment living becomes the norm in Sydney. And that's why thinking sustainably was another interdependent and linked area or domain of health and well-being in the context of the way apartment buildings are planned and in the context of ensuring fairness and justice for residents in Sydney, where the participant linked it with the planning vision of governments and equitable housing. Ultimately, achieving sustainable apartment buildings would also depend on other factors mentioned by the participants, which interlinks thinking sustainably with apartment day-to-day use, building functionality and its long-term, and also place belonging. So there you have it, the fifth and last crucial ingredient to creating healthy apartment buildings that decision makers involved in developing apartment buildings must understand and consider. Any approach decision makers take for proposed apartment buildings must take into consideration that factors are dynamic, interactive, and interdependent across different domains. And that is why it is crucial that different professionals, entities, and agencies work together, because each domain or area that influence health cannot be considered separately from others, and we have to think holistically. And if you need more information, I listed here some key references there on the slides, which you can refer to in addition to this video, including my own PhD thesis, which has all these examples as well as many other examples in details, and recent articles that I co-authored on the subject.